The stars shimmered like scattered diamonds against the endless dark, and through that silence came the Valdari fleet, 500 warships, each the size of a floating city, their hulls forged from black alloy that swallowed light. For 3,000 years, the Valdari Empire had spread across the galaxy like a storm. No planet had resisted them. No species had survived defiance. Worlds burned, civilizations fell, and the Empire marched on. At the center of this great swarm was the flagship Death of Worlds, a colossal vessel armed with weapons that could slice a moon in half. Admiral Voss Krellin, commander of the 47th Conquest Fleet, stood on the bridge, his forearms clasped behind his back. His skin was gray and ridged, his eyes glowing red like embers. The bridge around him pulsed with alien light, holographic readouts, tactical maps, and the quiet hum of victory that had followed him all his life. "Approaching target system," reported Commander Yuki, the youngest officer on the bridge, her voice steady but cautious. "Designation, Sol, third planet is inhabited, local name, Earth." Admiral Voss turned his crimson gaze toward the projection. A small blue-green world spun lazily in the air before him. He had seen hundreds of such worlds, beautiful, fragile, naive. "Status?" he asked. Yuki tapped her wrist console. "Primitive species, barely spacefaring, fragmented governments, limited weaponry, chemical projectiles, low-yield nuclear arms, no interplanetary defense grid. Estimated surrender time," she paused, 4 hours, perhaps less. The bridge chuckled quietly. Some officers exchanged bets, confident in another easy victory. Voss didn't smile. "The High Council believes this world holds symbolic value," he said. "Apparently their species transmits radio signals into space, noise, images, and music." He said the word as though it tasted foreign. Captain Minu, a sharp-minded strategist known for arrogance, grinned. "So they're dreamers, poets, even better. Conquering them will make a fine story for the archives." "Perhaps," Voss replied, his tone colder than vacuum. "Or perhaps the High Council wants to remind the galaxy that even dreamers kneel before the Empire." As the fleet moved closer, Earth's blue surface filled the screens. Clouds swirled over vast oceans, continents glittered with city lights, and the northern hemisphere glowed faintly from polar storms. To the Valdari, it was just another unclaimed jewel, soon to be stripped and catalogued. "Begin the intimidation pattern," Voss ordered. "Deploy the front line. I want every ship visible to their telescopes." "Yes, Admiral," Minu replied. "This will make a fine demonstration." Moments later, space rippled. The entire Valdari armada shimmered into view above the outer rim of the solar system. 500 ships aligned in perfect formation, their engines lighting the darkness like red suns. From Earth's orbiting satellites, faint signals transmitted their arrival, but the humans did not panic. No planetary distress calls, no desperate pleas, only a strange silence. The Valdari waited. On Earth, deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, a bunker came alive with quiet activity. The air was cool, humming with the sound of servers and faint whispers. Hundreds of people moved with calm precision, scientists, military officers, and engineers gathered from every nation. At the center of it all sat Dr. Jiwon Lee, Earth Defense Command's lead strategist. Her hair was tied in a simple bun, and her calm expression contrasted the chaos that should have surrounded her. She watched the alien ships on the main display. "Confirmation," said an operator. 500 warships, energy output consistent with Valdari technology, just as predicted. Dr. Jiwon nodded slowly, exactly on schedule. President Dong Hyun, elected as the temporary leader of a united Earth, stood beside her. His suit was wrinkled from sleepless nights. "Are you telling me," he said, voice low, "that we've known they were coming?" "For years," Jiwon replied. "The signals we picked up in the Uit cloud 3 decades ago were their scout probes. We've been preparing since then." Dong exhaled, half in awe, half in fear. "And you're sure we can handle this?" Jiwon smiled faintly. "We won't handle it the way they expect." In orbit aboard the Death of Worlds, Commander Yuki frowned. "Admiral," she said, "I'm receiving transmissions from Earth. They're sending." "Distress calls?" Voss asked, expecting the usual pattern. "No, sir," Yuki said slowly. "Mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric patterns, the value of pi, and," she hesitated, "translations in our language." Voss turned sharply. Impossible, no primitive world knows Valdari. Yet they do, Yuki said. And Admiral, they're inviting us to meet. The bridge went silent. An invitation, Captain Minu scoffed. They're either fools or hiding something. Voss stared at the glowing blue planet on the screen. No world had ever invited the Empire to land. They either fought or surrendered. But this was new. Prepare a diplomatic vessel, Voss said finally. I'm going down there myself. Sir, Minu protested, that's against protocol. Protocol is for ordinary conquests, Voss replied. This world feels different. Yuki glanced at him, unease flickering in her crimson eyes. Do you think it's a trap, Admiral? Voss almost smiled. If it is, Commander, then I want to see the kind of prey that dares set traps for hunters. As the small Valdari shuttle descended through the clouds, its hull glowing with re-entry heat, the Admiral looked down at Earth's surface. The continents were alive with light, oceans shimmered with reflection, and lightning danced in faraway storms. Beautiful, yes, but beauty had never saved anyone. The shuttle landed in a wide, green valley surrounded by snow-capped mountains. Waiting there was a group of humans, calm, well-dressed, and utterly fearless. No weapons, no panic, just polite expectation. At their center stood a woman with sharp eyes and a slight smile, Dr. Unipark, Earth's chief linguist and cyberneticist. She stepped forward and bowed slightly. Welcome to Earth, Admiral Voss, she said in perfect Valdari. The Admiral froze. How do you know our tongue? He demanded. Dr. Uni's smile deepened. We learn quickly. Behind her, the flags of every human nation fluttered in the wind. For the first time in history, Earth stood united, not in fear, but in purpose. From orbit, Commander Yuki watched the feed from the Admiral's ship. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. The humans were too calm, too prepared. Her sensors flickered. For a brief moment, they picked up massive energy readings beneath Earth's surface. But then the signal vanished as though it had never existed. Captain Minu, she said quietly, are your scanners functioning correctly? He frowned, of course, why? Because, Yuki said slowly, I think the humans are hiding something. In the Geneva command bunker, Dr. Jewin watched the Admiral's arrival through hidden cameras. Around her, screens showed data streams, gravitational field fluctuations, electromagnetic cloaks, and power grids humming beneath the crust. Shield grid at standby, an operator reported. Orbital camouflage functioning at full efficiency, another said. Subsurface reactors charged and stable. Jewin nodded. Good, keep them hidden. Let them believe we're harmless for now. President Dong stepped beside her. You're really going to invite them to talk? Of course, Jewin said. They expect panic. We'll give them hospitality. Dong gave her a puzzled look. And if that doesn't work? Jewin's smile was calm, too calm. Then we moved to Plan B. What's Plan B? Jewin turned her gaze toward the image of Earth, gleaming like a jewel in the dark. We remind them why no predator on Earth has ever survived hunting humans. In orbit, the Valdari fleet waited for orders. The Admiral's shuttle had landed safely, but something about the planet made even the veterans uneasy. The readings were inconsistent, energy levels fluctuated. Satellite scans returned false data. It was as if the entire planet was wrapped in an illusion. Lieutenant Jin Wu, the youngest scanner operator, looked at his display. Sir, he said to Captain Minu, I'm detecting distortions in the electromagnetic spectrum, like something masking the surface. Minu waved it off. Sensor glitch, the atmosphere's interfering. Jin frowned. Sir, it's not the atmosphere, it's deliberate. On the planet, Dr. Uni led Admiral Voss into a vast underground hall. Walls lined with screens showing star maps, alien languages, and Valdari battle formations. The Admiral stopped cold. These are our schematics, he said, his voice low. Our fleet designs, classified information. Dr. Uni clasped her hands behind her back. Yes, she said gently, we've been studying your people for quite some time. Admiral Voss stared at her, feeling something he had not felt in centuries, uncertainty. What do you want? He asked. Dr. Uni looked him in the eyes and said simply, a conversation. As they spoke, an invisible ripple spread across space above Earth, a vast outline forming like a shadow between dimensions. Hidden behind layers of distorted light, an enormous human-built structure flickered into partial visibility. A station larger than any Valdari ship, orbiting silently between the folds of space-time. Commander Yuki's sensors spiked in alarm. "Admiral," she whispered into her comms, "you need to see this." The Valdari shuttle floated upward from the Swiss Valley, engines whispering like thunder under restraint. The Earth delegation had been polite, unnervingly so. No begging, no tears, no military parade of intimidation, just calm handshakes, quiet smiles, and words that carried too much confidence. Now the Admiral's craft rose through pale clouds toward the orbiting station humans had called Diplomatic Platform 1. To Valdari eyes, it was invisible until the last second. Space rippled, light bent, and suddenly, there it was. A gigantic station, metallic and gleaming, its hull curved like the inside of a pearl. It shimmered with blue energy veins and carried human insignias on the side. United Earth Defense Network. Admiral Voss stood at the viewport, silent. His reflection stared back at him, four-armed, armored, and suddenly smaller than he liked to feel. Around him, his escort crew shifted uneasily. Commander Yuki's hands trembled on her datapad. "Sir," she said quietly, "this station, it doesn't appear in any scans. It's cloaked with quantum distortion fields far beyond our sensor range." Voss's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. No primitive world can." "And yet," Yuki interrupted gently, "there it is." The Admiral turned away from the window and adjusted his ceremonial armor. "We proceed," he said. "If this is a trap, we'll see what kind of mind sets it." Inside Diplomatic Platform 1. The air was crisp and faintly metallic, the kind of filtered atmosphere that came from perfect life support systems. Human soldiers stood in clean formation along the corridor, unarmed but disciplined. No fear in their eyes. They watched the Valdari delegation with calm curiosity, as if studying a species of interest rather than a threat. Admiral Voss's claws clicked against the polished floor. His crimson gaze swept over every camera and sensor hidden in the walls. He could feel the eyes of 1,000 humans watching him. Then the doors opened, revealing Dr. Uni Park, the woman who had welcomed him on Earth. She was dressed in a simple gray suit, her hair tied neatly, her posture relaxed yet deliberate. She smiled. "Admiral Voss," she said in flawless Valdari, "welcome aboard our station. Please follow me. The President and Dr. Jiwon are expecting you." Voss studied her closely. "You speak as though we are guests," he said. "You realize your world is one order away from annihilation." Dr. Uni didn't blink. "Oh yes, that's why we made tea." Commander Yuki blinked. "Tea. Cultural tradition," Dr. Uni explained with polite cheer. "It helps calm nerves before important conversations. I believe your people have something similar, blood incense before battle." Voss stiffened. "You know our customs." "I make it my business to know," Uni said, her tone soft but pointed. The Hall of Mirrors. They entered a vast chamber filled with holographic projections. Star maps rotated in slow, hypnotic arcs. Thousands of lights marked Valdari territories, red systems connected by lines of conquest, like blood vessels stretching across the galaxy. In the center of the room was a single table, large enough for giants, surrounded by empty seats. On the far side sat President Dong Hyun and Dr. Jiwon Lee. President Dong stood as the Valdari entered. His voice was steady, diplomatic. "Admiral, Commander, please be seated. Humanity welcomes you." Voss hesitated. "You presume much human. You stand before the commander of the most powerful fleet in history." Jiwon smiled faintly. "History tends to surprise those who believe it cannot change." The Admiral's eyes flicked toward the holographic walls. Something about the maps disturbed him. They weren't just decorative, they were accurate. Every occupied world, every fleet movement, every secret shipyard was there, displayed in eerie precision. Even Valdari admirals didn't have such a complete map. "How do you know these?" he demanded. Dr. Uni pressed a few keys on her tablet. The maps zoomed in, highlighting one of the Empire's secure military sectors, an area no outsider had ever seen. The hologram displayed weapons depots, patrol routes, and even personnel rotations. "Because we've been listening to you," she said. "For 50 years. A ripple of unease spread through the Valdari officers. Commander Yuki's throat tightened. She'd heard rumors, whispers that certain conquered worlds were falling into rebellion. Could it all be connected? "You're bluffing," Captain Minu said. "No world has ever breached Valdari encryption." Jiwin looked at him evenly. "That's true, no world has, but humans, we're not very good at following rules." She turned her screen toward them. On it were fragments of intercepted Valdari military transmissions, words, orders, even personal logs from officers the Admiral recognized. His heart sank. "Your encryption rotates every 7 hours," Jiwin said. "Elegant system. Unfortunately, one of your scout vessels left behind a minor data beacon during its visit to our asteroid belt. We studied it for years. Eventually, we learned the rhythm." Voss's fists clenched. "You dare spy on the Empire?" President Dong leaned forward. "No, Admiral, we dared to survive it." The reveal. Dr. Uni gestured to the walls again. The maps shifted, no longer red. Now green dots appeared across the Valdari-controlled galaxy. Hundreds, thousands. "These are your conquered worlds," she said. "But not all of them are quiet. Some have begun to resist. Hidden cells, secret militias, old armies reborn in the shadows." Yuki whispered, "That's impossible." Dr. Jiwin folded her hands. "It was impossible until we helped them." A long silence filled the room. The words hit harder than any weapon. "You," Voss growled, "you meddle in our territories." "We inspired them," Jiwin corrected softly. "We shared ideas, technology, communication links. They fight differently now, not as separate planets, but as one mind." President Dong looked directly at the Admiral. "For 3,000 years, you've ruled through fear. We intend to show the galaxy that fear is not the only way." The Admiral's doubt. Voss felt the floor tilt beneath his certainty. For centuries, he had crushed empires and silenced rebellions. But these humans, they didn't tremble, they smiled. They knew his secrets. He leaned forward, voice low and dangerous. "If you think your tricks will save you, you are mistaken. When my fleet opens fire, this planet will burn." Dr. Uni's eyes gleamed. "Then perhaps you should see what you're aiming at." She tapped her tablet. The walls turned transparent. Beyond the glass, stars filled the void, but they were wrong. The constellations shimmered, distorted, as if seen through a rippling ocean. Then the light shifted, revealing something monstrous hidden behind it, the full body of diplomatic Platform 1, anchored between folds of quantum space. It wasn't a station, it was a fortress. Hundreds of human warships were docked along its outer rings, completely cloaked. Massive energy conduits pulsed like veins of light through its structure. "This station isn't in orbit," Uni said. "It exists between normal space and a quantum fold. That's why your sensors couldn't detect it." Yuki stepped forward in disbelief. No species has achieved stable dimensional phasing. That's impossible," Jiwin finished gently. "We heard that word often, usually right before we proved it wrong." Emotional interlude. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Voss felt something alien in his chest, doubt. These creatures were supposed to be primitives, barely industrial, but everything he saw defied the rules of empire. "Why hide all this?" he asked. "Why not show your strength before?" President Dong sighed. "Because survival requires patience. We needed the galaxy to underestimate us, including you." Voss's eyes darkened. "You've been preparing for this moment." "Yes," said Jiwin softly, "ever since your probes first appeared in our skis." A choice of tone. Commander Yuki looked between her Admiral and the humans. "Admiral," she said carefully, "if what they say is true, maybe conquest is no longer the right way. Perhaps the High Council." "Enough," Voss barked. "You forget yourself, Commander." Yuki fell silent, but Jiwin noticed her hesitation. Compassion flickered behind her disciplined facade. The scientist leaned forward. "Commander Yuki," she said gently, "you've seen what your empire does to the worlds it conquers. You've seen the ash, the silence. Do you truly believe peace can't exist?" Yuki's mandibles tightened. I serve the empire." Jiwin nodded. "We all serve something. The question is whether it deserves our loyalty." The calm before the storm. The room grew quiet again. The hum of energy pulsed through the station like a heartbeat. Finally, President Dong stood. "Admiral, we are not offering surrender. We are offering choice. Join us in peace or attack us in arrogance, but remember this." He turned toward the star map, where red Valdari worlds flickered under new green lights. The Age of Empires is ending, whether you wish it or not. Voss glared at him. You dare to dictate the fate of the galaxy. Dr. Uni smiled faintly. Not dictate, redefine. Cliffhanger, end of part, aye aye. Before the Admiral could respond, the lights dimmed. A low vibration shook the station. Yuki's communicator flared with static. She pressed a hand to her earpiece. Admiral, shouted Captain Minu's voice over the comms. We're detecting massive power surges across the planet. Unknown sources, thousands of them. The Admiral froze. Define unknown. Sir, Minu said, voice cracking, they're coming from beneath the surface. Entire continents lighting up like reactors. The planet is armed. Uni exchanged a calm glance with Jiwon. President Dong exhaled. It seems, he said softly, the conversation has just changed. The holographic walls shimmered, revealing Earth below, its cities and mountains glowing faintly with blue light, energy lines tracing across continents like veins under skin. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the Death of Worlds sent a message not of command, but of fear. The command deck of the Death of Worlds pulsed with crimson light. Alarm sirens blared through the ship as every display flooded with data. Energy readings from Earth were spiking beyond comprehension, patterns no Valdari sensor could categorize. Commander Yuki's claws danced over her console, her voice trembling despite her discipline. Admiral, readings confirm planetary-scale activity, energy signatures detected across all major landmasses. It's not natural, it's coordinated. Captain Minu slammed his fist against the railing. They're activating weapons, they're preparing for war. Admiral Voss stood motionless at the center of the bridge, eyes glowing like coals. No, he said quietly, they're revealing something, the question is what? Through the ship's viewports, Earth glowed faintly blue. Lines of light spread across its surface like veins of fire beneath glass. Oceans shimmered, mountains pulsed, and even the clouds seemed charged with energy. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Voss realized he was looking not at prey, but at a predator pretending to sleep. Beneath Geneva, Earth Defense Command. Far below the Swiss Alps, a massive complex vibrated with restrained power. Cables the size of tree trunks ran through reinforced walls. Gigantic reactors hummed in buried chambers, each connected to the planetary defense network. Dr. Jiwon Lee walked through the central command hall, her coat brushing against the metal floor. The room was vast, a cathedral of screens and holograms projecting the state of the planet in real time. Every continent, every node, every hidden facility glowed on her map. Technicians moved quickly, focused but calm. No one panicked, no one shouted. This was the moment they'd trained for all their lives. Status report, Jiwon said. Subsurface generators stable, replied a young officer. Shield capacitors charging at 72%. Global relay grid synced and online, all sites reporting green. President Dong Hyun entered behind her, his face pale but composed. Doctor, he said, the Valdari fleet is preparing a demonstration strike. Their ships are charging weapons. Jiwon nodded. Let them. The president frowned. You sound almost calm. Jiwon turned to him, eyes reflecting the cold blue glow of the holograms. Because fear is what they expect. They've conquered by fear for 3 millennia. If we show none, they lose their first advantage. The buried giants. Across the world, under oceans and deserts, in forests and mountains, humanity's secrets awoke. In the Pacific, a massive trench stirred. Hidden within its depths, a structure of steel and coral rose slowly, a defensive platform powered by geothermal vents. Energy flowed up through the crust, feeding the shield grid above. In the Sahara, what looked like an endless desert suddenly shimmered. Beneath the sand lay rows of buried launch silos, each disguised as dunes, each armed with payloads designed not to kill but to disarm. In the Himalayas, buried beneath ice, engineers activated the celestial array, a vast network of satellites cloaked for decades, their mirrors aligning to channel solar energy directly into the defense grid. All of Earth, oceans, cities, even weather systems, were pieces of an enormous living machine. Admiral Voss, the weight of doubt. On the Death of Worlds, Voss stared at the shifting blue light of Earth below. They've built an energy grid under the crust, he muttered. I can see the signatures now. The power output exceeds that of our capital world. Captain Minu swallowed hard. Impossible. They have no mining fleets, no Dyson arrays. How could they achieve this? Commander Yuki hesitated. Sir, if they've been studying us, perhaps they learned faster than we expected. Voss turned slowly toward her. Commander, are you suggesting these creatures, barely industrial 50 years ago, can match the Empire's science? Yuki's voice was quiet but firm. I'm suggesting they were never as weak as we believed. Dr. Jiwan's reflection. Back on Earth, Jiwan stood before a panoramic screen showing the alien armada hanging above the atmosphere. They looked like insects, deadly, precise, ancient, and yet somehow fragile. I've studied them for 30 years, she said to President Dong, her tone almost reverent. The Valdari believe in hierarchy. Power flows downward. Orders, obedience, control, that's their flaw. Dong folded his arms, and ours. Our flaw, Jiwan said, is chaos. But chaos also breeds innovation. When you can't control everyone, you adapt. That's what we did. That's what they'll never understand. The command room of the Empire. On board Death of Worlds, chaos was spreading through order. Officers barked updates, technicians recalibrated sensors, and ships repositioned nervously. Admiral, said Jin Wu, I'm detecting gravitational anomalies around the planet. Something's interfering with our targeting locks. Interference, Minu asked. Electronic jamming. No, sir, said the young officer. It's physical. Their magnetic field is fluctuating in controlled patterns. It's distorting space-time in localized zones. Yuki stared. They're using their planet magnetosphere as a weapon. Vas clenched his jaw. Impossible. But then again, so was everything else about this cursed world. He turned toward his communications officer. Contact the High Council. Tell them the conquest of Earth may require reevaluation. The gathering storm. Back in Geneva, the final phase of activation began. The power grid beneath the Earth's surface synchronized, creating an invisible web of energy connecting all continents. The lights flickered once and then steadied. A technician raised his hand. Dr. Jiwan, all planetary nodes are aligned. Shield network is ready to deploy on your command. Jiwan glanced at President Dong. Once we activate it, we reveal our hand. Dong nodded, then let them see who they're dealing with. She touched the holographic globe, her fingers tracing the Pacific Rim. Activate planetary defense grid. A deep vibration rolled through the planet. In space, energy surged outward, an expanding ripple of blue light wrapping around Earth like a second skin. From orbit, the Valdari fleet recoiled. Their scanners blazed white with interference. The planet now looked like a shimmering sphere of living light. Confrontation. Aboard the diplomatic station, the meeting room vibrated. Admiral Voss steadied himself against the table, eyes blazing. What have you done? Dr. Uni, still calm, poured another cup of tea. You were preparing to demonstrate your weapons, were you not? We thought it polite to demonstrate ours first. Voss's claws scraped against the metal. You call that polite? Uni smiled. We're new to galactic manners, you'll have to forgive us. Commander Yuki's communicator buzzed again. Captain Minu to Admiral, energy readings from the planet are destabilizing our shields. We're losing sensor coherence. Uni looked at him, her tone serene. Your fleet won't be harmed. We've adjusted our grid to avoid direct interference. But your weapons won't work while you're here. Consider it a safety precaution. Voss's voice was barely a whisper now. You've built a weapon around your planet. Jiwan's voice echoed through the station speakers. Not a weapon, a mirror. Whatever energy you project at us, we can reflect it back, stronger. The human philosophy. President Dong stepped closer to the Admiral. You came here to conquer, to teach us fear. But fear only works when the other side believes they have no choice. We always have a choice. Voss glared. You think yourselves powerful because you've hidden well, but the Empire will adapt. We always do. Dong nodded. So do we. The President looked toward Yuki, his expression softening. Tell me, Commander, do you know how many Valdari died in your Empire's first conquests? Yuki hesitated. Millions. Do you know how many humans died in our wars? Yuki shook her head. Dong's gaze hardened. Billions, and everyone taught us how to fight smarter, how to endure longer, how to win by losing. The first strike. Back in orbit, Captain Minu watched as the energy grid around Earth pulsed again. "Admiral," he said over comms, voice shaking, "our fleet is in perfect formation. Shall we open fire?" Voss hesitated. Every instinct told him to strike, to erase this insolent world before it grew more dangerous. But something, perhaps fear, perhaps fascination, held him back. Yuki's voice came through his earpiece. "Sir, if you attack, you may start a war we can't win." Voss closed his eyes. Every empire says that until they're destroyed. He raised his hand. "Prepare the demonstration strike. Target the asteroid belt. Fire on my command." The order rippled across the fleet. Cannons hummed, reactors roared, and energy built like thunder behind the stars. Then, in a single voice of fire, the Valdari fleet unleashed their wrath. The sky burns. From Earth, people looked up and saw the heavens ignite. Blue trails arced across the sky as the Valdari plasma cannons fired, hundreds of beams converging on the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The impact lit the void like a newborn sun. Even through the shield grid, the light washed over the planet's atmosphere. The demonstration had begun. On board Deathworlders, Captain Minu smiled grimly. That should make them tremble. But in the Geneva bunker, Dr. Jiwan merely whispered, "Perfect." President Dong turned to her, startled. "Perfect." Jiwan's eyes glittered. "They've shown us their full power signature, every frequency, every modulation, every detail we needed." She turned to her team. "Begin recording, feed the data to the reflection algorithm. Let's give our guests a proper welcome." High above, the Valdari fleet began to reposition, unaware that every blast they had fired had already been captured, analyzed, and countermapped in real time. In 20 minutes, Earth would respond, not with destruction, but with revelation. Admiral Voss stared at the glowing world below and muttered, "They can't stop us. Nothing can stop the Empire." But deep beneath Geneva, Dr. Jiwan smiled coldly and whispered, "Then let's teach them what impossible really means." The darkness of space erupted in light. 500 Valdari warships unleashed their fury in perfect synchronization, massive plasma cannons discharging oceans of fire toward the blue planet below. The void itself seemed to tremble. Each blast carried enough energy to vaporize continents, shatter mountains, and boil oceans. From orbit, it looked like the wrath of gods. On the flagship Deathworlders, Admiral Voss watched the attack unfold through the main viewport. The hum of the cannons echoed like distant thunder. His lips curved into the faintest trace of satisfaction. "Beautiful," Captain Minu said softly. "That's the sound of another world bending to the Empire's will." But the sound that reached them next was silence. The plasma barrage met an unseen barrier just above Earth's atmosphere and stopped. The beams spread outward in a cascade of color, refracting into glowing ribbons that rippled across the planet's night sky. What should have been annihilation became a breathtaking aurora that painted the heavens in green, blue, and gold. Voss stared unblinking. "What is this?" Commander Yuki whispered, "They're reflecting it." "Impossible," Minu hissed. "Nothing can absorb that much energy." Yuki's scanners flashed red and blue. "Not absorbing, redirecting. The energy is being captured and dispersed across a field network, planetary scale." Admiral Voss's jaw clenched. The entire fleet had just fired its full might, and Earth had turned their attack into a light show. The calm within the storm. Deep beneath Geneva, the lights dimmed for only a moment as the shield grid stabilized. The ground rumbled faintly, then settled again. "Impact contained," a technician reported. "No atmospheric breach, shield integrity at 88% and holding." Dr. Jiwan Li exhaled slowly. So far, so good. President Dong Haiyan watched the glowing hologram of the planet, a living web of blue light shielding every inch of the surface. "They've just fired their strongest weapons at us," he said, "and we're still here." Jiwan smiled faintly. "That's the point, let them wonder why." Aboard the Valdari flagship. On the Deathworlders, confusion turned into panic. Technicians scrambled to interpret readings that made no sense. The Admiral's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Report. The planet's shield has nullified our plasma fire, sir," cried Jin Wu. Energy absorption exceeding theoretical limits. I've never seen anything like it. Voss slammed his fist against the console, cracking the display. Impossible. Every defense system has a limit. Find it. Commander Yuki's voice shook. Sir, if they can reflect our firepower, attacking again could. Silence, Voss snapped. Charge weapons again, this time we'll burn through it. Observation deck, diplomatic platform 1. Dr. Unipark stood before a wall of transparent glass overlooking the battle. Commander Yuki's transmission from the flagship still echoed faintly through the station's comms. Uni poured herself a cup of tea, her expression serene. They're doing exactly what we expected. President Dong joined her, his reflection floating beside hers against the backdrop of the burning sky. It feels strange, he admitted quietly. Watching them fire, knowing the power they hold, and feeling nothing but calm. Uni nodded. Power is only frightening when you don't understand it. We've been studying them for 50 years. They've never once changed tactics. They think fear is strategy, Dong murmured. Exactly, Uni said. But fear doesn't work on a species that has already faced extinction by its own hand. The data harvest. Inside Earth Defense Command, hundreds of quantum computers processed terabytes of combat data. Every pulse of plasma, every frequency of energy, every fluctuation of heat was recorded. Analysis complete, one of the technicians said. Their weapon output cycles follow a 7-second rotation, shield frequency adjusted to resonate with their energy cores. We can now anticipate their firing sequence before they complete the charge. Dr. Juan's lips curved into a knowing smile. Good, then the next volley will teach them something new. She activated the next phase of the defense protocol. Across the planet, massive subterranean emitters adjusted frequency. The shield grid glowed brighter, no longer just absorbing energy but redirecting it. The second strike. Fire again, Admiral Voss roared. The fleet obeyed. 500 plasma cannons blazed once more, painting the void with rivers of white-hot destruction. But this time, Earth didn't absorb the energy. It sent it back. The reflected energy burst outward from the shield like lightning reversed, slamming into the Valdari formation. Several ships were engulfed instantly, their hulls melted by their own redirected plasma. The shockwaves rippled through space, scattering the fleet's perfect formation. Shields collapsing on ships 231 through 240, Jinwu shouted. 3 vessels unresponsive. Energy rebound at 137% efficiency. Voss froze, speechless. The impossible was happening before his eyes. They turned our own weapons against us, Yuki said quietly. They learned the reflection ratio faster than we could adapt. Retreat formation, Minyu barked. Pull back, regroup outside the planet's gravity well. No, Voss thundered. We hold position, we are the Empire. But even as he said it, the fleet trembled. Some ships drifting off course, systems flickering, crews in disarray. Inside the human command network, President Dong leaned over the console. Damage reports. None, replied Juan. The planetary grid handled it perfectly. Dong stared at the screen showing the Valdari fleet tearing itself apart. You're not destroying them. No, Juan said simply. We're teaching them. Teaching them what? That we don't fight for domination, she said. We fight for understanding, and they're going to understand fear in a way they never have before. Commander Yuki's conflict. On board the flagship, Commander Yuki's composure began to crack. She'd seen destruction, yes, but never like this. Never her own fleet, her own people, undone by an enemy who wasn't even striking back. She turned to Voss. Sir, we have to stop. This isn't a battle, it's a demonstration. They're showing us they can end us without firing a shot. Voss's red eyes burned. You would have us kneel before primitives. Primitives? She shouted. They just absorbed the combined fire of 500 Valdari warships. How many more do you want to lose before you call them what they are? Superior. The bridge fell silent. For a moment, even the hum of engines seemed to fade. Then Voss turned away, his voice cold and sharp. If you fear them, Commander, you are welcome to return to your quarters. The Empire does not surrender. Yuki's throat tightened. No, Admiral, it doesn't learn either. Earth responds. In orbit above the chaos, Small flashes of light began appearing, hundreds of them. "New contacts," shouted Jinwoo. Dozens of ships emerging from nowhere, no jump signatures, no detectable engines. Voss leaned forward, eyes widening. One by one, the cloaked human vessels revealed themselves. Sleek, silver-gray, smaller than Valdari warships, but moving with terrifying grace. Each ship's hull shimmered with adaptive camouflage, bending light around it until it seemed to flicker between existence and nothingness. "Sir," Yuki whispered, "those ships were inside our formation the whole time." The comms crackled, then a human voice filled the bridge, calm and confident. "Admiral Voss, this is Dr. Jiwon Lee of Earth Defense Command. We request you stand down. Continuing hostilities will only result in further embarrassment." Captain Minyu snarled, "They're taunting us." Voss's claws dug into the armrest. "Cut communications, ready all torpedoes." "Admiral," Yuki began. "Enough," Voss roared. "We will end this farce now." A deadly reflection. The Valdari torpedoes launched in synchronized arcs, hundreds of them burning through space like comets. But as they neared the planet, their trajectories bent. The gravitational field around Earth rippled and the torpedoes reversed course. They turned around mid-flight, looping back toward the fleet that had fired them. "Evasive maneuvers," Minyu shouted. "Break formation." But it was too late. The torpedoes slammed into their original launch points, detonating in massive explosions that shattered entire ships into drifting debris. Voss's own bridge shook violently. The lights flickered, systems screamed warnings. Jinwoo clung to his console. "Sir, over 100 ships are down. Our entire flank is gone." Voss's rage turned to something colder, fear. How are they doing this?" Yuki's eyes were on her console, voice trembling. "They've turned the planet's gravitational field into a lens. They're bending our weapons back at us." "In the Geneva Command bunker." "Success," Jiwon said, watching the explosions on the screen. "They've just destroyed a fifth of their own fleet." President Dong's expression was grim. "You planned for this." Jiwon's eyes softened. "We hoped we wouldn't need to, but hope has never been enough to keep humanity alive." She turned toward her officers. "Prepare global transmission. It's time the galaxy knew the truth." In orbit, the Valdari flagship limped through debris, smoke rising from damaged hulls. Around them, human ships floated like silent sentinels, not attacking, merely watching. The comm system on Voss's command chair flickered to life again. Dr. Jiwon's voice came through, calm and resolute. "Admiral, you've seen what happens when you underestimate humanity. But this isn't about victory. It's about choice. Withdraw your fleet and live to make one." The line went dead. Admiral Voss stared at the shattered remains of his once invincible armada. He had come to conquer. Now he was fighting to survive. Space was on fire. The wreckage of dozens of Valdari warships drifted through the void, glowing like embers in the night. Thousands of fragments floated between the stars, pieces of once invincible ships, now silent witnesses to a truth no Valdari dared to speak aloud. On board the Death of Worlds, Admiral Voss stood rigid amid the chaos. Smoke drifted across the command deck and sparks rained from damaged conduits. The hum of engines had fallen silent, the pride of the Empire brought to its knees by a single planet that shouldn't have even mattered. Commander Yuki stood beside him, face pale, voice low. "Sir, half the fleet is gone. Another 100 ships are disabled. Our long-range comms are being jammed. We can't contact the High Council." Voss's red eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Jammed by what?" "Not interference," Yuki said softly. "Precision disruption, they're inside our systems." Before he could respond, the bridge lights flickered again, and then words began to appear across every screen in Valdari glyphs. "Hello, Admiral. We've been exp. Infiltration." "Impossible," Captain Minyu shouted. "How did they breach our encryption? This ship's network is sealed." "It was sealed," Yuki interrupted, "until we entered Earth's gravity well." Voss glared. "You're saying they infected our fleet from orbit." Yuki turned her console toward him. "Not orbit, sir, before orbit." The Admiral stared at the data, hundreds of microscopic anomalies embedded within the fleet systems. Code strings so tiny, so simple they looked like noise. But they were. "Nanoviruses," Yuki said. Self-replicating data fragments hiding in our diagnostic routines. They were probably attached to our hulls when we passed through the asteroid field during approach. Minyu's face twisted in disbelief. They used us to hack an entire fleet. Yuki nodded grimly. Not dust, nanotech. Beneath the surface, Earth Defense Command. Dr. Hanasio walked briskly through the dim corridor leading to the Neural Warfare Division. Unlike Jiwon, she wasn't an engineer or physicist. She was a psychologist, a master of understanding the patterns that drove alien minds. She entered the main control chamber, a dark room filled with humming glass spheres suspended in magnetic fields. Each sphere pulsed with faint blue light, a network of artificial neurons mimicking the Valdari brain structure. Technicians stood at the ready. Hana approached the command dais. Status. Phase 2 neural overlay complete, one replied. The nanoviruses are fully integrated into their network systems. We're ready for behavioral simulation. Hana smiled slightly. Good, let's see how they handle doubt. The mind game. Back on the Death of Worlds, something strange began to happen. Crew members reported hearing faint whispers through their comms, voices speaking Valdari but distorted. Some claimed the voices gave orders. Others heard cries for help. Entire communication lines became a maze of phantom transmissions. Sir, Jinwoo said nervously, I'm getting orders from you. Voss froze, from me. Yes, Admiral, direct command codes authenticated with your signature. Those are forgeries, Minyu barked. Shut them down. But more messages came, orders to reposition ships, disable weapons, reroute power. Dozens of captains followed the commands automatically, thinking they came from Central Command. Within minutes, the Valdari fleet began to turn on itself, some ships drifting into others, some cutting power, some firing at phantom targets that didn't exist. It wasn't a battle anymore, it was a nightmare. Hana's experiment. In the Geneva bunker, Dr. Hana watched the chaos unfold on her displays. Lines of alien script scrolled down her monitors, real-time neural stress readings from Valdari captains. They're cracking, she murmured. The Valdari mind depends on hierarchy. When the chain of command breaks, they panic. They can't function independently. President Dong stood behind her, his arms crossed. You're breaking them psychologically. Hana didn't look away from the screen. We're showing them the mirror they've avoided for 3,000 years. For the first time, they're seeing what it feels like to live in fear of the unknown. Commander Yuki's crisis. On board the Death of Worlds, Yuki clutched her head. The voices were everywhere, Admiral Voss's orders, repeated over and over, layered with others, contradicting, twisting. Admiral, she shouted, the fleet is losing cohesion, they're attacking their own ships. Countermand the false orders, Voss roared. I'm trying, Yuki said, fingers flying across her console. But they've copied your command key. Every time I shut one down, another appears. Voss turned to Minyu. Shut down all network communications, cut every link. Minyu hesitated. Sir, that will isolate us from the fleet. Do it. Within seconds, the bridge lights dimmed as the command network severed itself from the rest of the fleet. The crew held their breath. Silence returned, but only for a moment. The whisper in the dark. A soft sound filled the air, a rhythmic pulse almost like a heartbeat. The screens turned black, then one by one white letters appeared again. Do you see it yet, Admiral? Fear is not a weapon, it's a mirror. Yuki's voice was barely a whisper. They're talking to us directly. Voss's claws dug into his command chair. Trace it, find their source. Already trying, sir, but it's everywhere. The signal isn't coming from Earth, it's coming from inside our systems. Then purge them, Voss said coldly. Purge everything. Sir, that could erase the fleet's entire data core. Then do it, he growled. Better an empty ship than one haunted by ghosts. The silent rebellion. But on a dozen Valdari vessels, something unexpected happened. Officers, shaken by the chaos, stopped listening to the corrupted chain of command. Some shut down their weapons. Others tried to hail the humans directly. Admiral, Yuki said quietly, we're receiving transmission requests from within our own fleet. They're asking to surrender. Voss stared at her speechless. Surrender to them. She nodded. Sir, the men are afraid, they don't know what's real anymore. The admiral turned to face the burning horizon of Earth below. He had spent his life teaching worlds to fear him. Now he finally understood what it meant to be on the other side of that terror. The humans strike again. At that moment, Dr. Juan's voice echoed across every Valdari ship simultaneously. Calm, clear, unmistakably human. Admiral Voss, your network integrity has collapsed. Your chain of command is compromised. Your ships are disarmed. This is not an attack, it's a conversation. Her words resonated through the void like a whisper in every ear. We don't seek your destruction, Admiral. We seek your understanding. The galaxy has lived under your empire's shadow for too long. The age of conquest ends today, not because we're stronger, but because we learned to see your weakness, arrogance. On the flagship, Voss trembled with rage, cut the transmission. But before his crew could act, the ship's holographic projector activated on its own. Dr. Juan's image appeared before them, a human woman standing calmly amid the chaos, hands clasped behind her back. Admiral, she said softly, you've been fighting a war that no longer exists. We studied your history, your psychology, your philosophy. Everything you believe about strength is built on fear. But humanity learned long ago that fear can be mastered. Voss glared, you dare lecture me. No, Juan replied, I'm inviting you to listen. The choice. For a long time, no one spoke. The flickering lights of the dying fleet illuminated the faces of the Valdari crew, some terrified, some awestruck, some silent. Commander Yuki took a hesitant step forward. Sir, maybe she's right, maybe we should listen. Voss's expression softened for the first time in decades. His empire, his fleet, his power, all slipping through his fingers. And yet the humans hadn't destroyed him. They'd humbled him. He turned toward the hologram of Juan. If I agree to hear you, he said, what happens then? Then, Juan replied, you'll finally see what peace looks like. Meanwhile on Earth. In the Geneva bunker, Hana watched the neural overlay fade as Juan's live signal replaced it. She's doing it, Hana whispered. She's turning fear into trust. President Dong nodded slowly. Then perhaps it's time for the final demonstration. Hana smiled faintly. Phase 3. Phase 3, Dong confirmed. Above Earth, the chaos stilled. The Valdari fleet hung in silence, their weapons offline, their systems crippled, their commander speechless. Then, without warning, the human fleet decloaked again. Hundreds of ships, sleek and deadly, surrounding the Valdari like wolves encircling an old predator. Their lights glowed white, not red, not the color of war, but of revelation. Juan's voice echoed one last time. Admiral, it's time you understood what humanity truly is. And as her words faded, the skis themselves began to move, constellations shifting, stars bending. Space was warping around Earth like a living thing. The Valdari fleet wasn't just losing a battle. They were witnessing the birth of something the galaxy had never seen before. The stars themselves were moving. Admiral Voss watched in stunned silence as the constellations around Earth began to twist and ripple like reflections on disturbed water. The void, the endless, silent black of space, was changing shape. From the flagship's viewports, a strange light spread outward from Earth's atmosphere, bending and folding the darkness around it. Within moments, the entire solar system seemed to shimmer with unseen threads. Gravitational distortions rippled through the fleet's sensors, each pulse disrupting weapons, engines, and communications alike. Commander Yuki's voice broke through the static, strained and trembling. Admiral, gravitational anomalies spreading. I can't even read our position anymore. Space itself is moving. Voss's claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. How? What are they doing? Captain Minu shouted from across the bridge. Sir, they're ships. Those smaller ones, they're generating quantum folds. It's like they're weaving a field across the entire sector. Field, Voss demanded. Not a shield, not a weapon, it's, Minu's voice faltered, control. Above the planet, hundreds of human ships now moved in perfect formation around Earth, their sleek hulls reflecting the glow of the planet below. From the ground, they looked like a second constellation rising, an artificial aurora of steel and light. Each vessel carried gravitational emitters that pulsed in rhythm, syncing with the planet's defense grid. The effect was stunning. The entire solar system began to act as one massive machine, bending gravity, light, and electromagnetic energy with surgical precision. From orbit, it looked as though humanity had reached out and grabbed the very fabric of space. Geneva Command, Earth Defense Central. Dr. Jiwon Lee stood before a wall of projections showing the synchronized operation of every ship, every satellite, and every planetary relay. She could see the Valdari fleet caught in the field, massive ships struggling to move as their engines fought against invisible gravity wells. Technicians called out updates, but Jiwon barely heard them. Her eyes were on the display of the death of worlds. "They're holding position," she said. "Admiral Voss hasn't fired again." President Dong Hyun nodded, stepping beside her. "Because he's realizing something," he said softly. "He's not fighting a planet anymore, he's fighting an idea." Jiwon's gaze hardened. "Exactly, and that's something no empire can conquer." Admiral Voss, the breaking point. On board the flagship, chaos teetered on the edge of despair. Half the systems were failing, the rest gave readings that no Valdari scientist had ever imagined possible. Gravity fluctuations pulled ships out of formation, sensors looped endlessly, and engines refused to obey. Lieutenant Jin Woo turned in panic. "Sir, their ships are bending spacetime itself. They're creating interference zones, miniature folds that overlap. Our drive cores can't stabilize." Voss slammed his fist down. "Counteract with resonance dampers." "We've tried," Yuki cried. "They're using variable harmonics. Every time we stabilize, they shift frequencies. It's like fighting wind with stone." The Admiral's breath came slow and harsh. "Impossible." But it was. He was watching it happen. The humans had weaponized the laws of physics themselves. The human fleet. From the perspective of the human captains, the battlefield was quiet, eerily so. Each commander received direct synchronization data from Geneva Command through the lattice, the neural coordination system that linked every pilot and AI assistant into a shared network. To the Valdari, it was chaos. To humanity, it was music. Dozens of ships glided through folded space, moving as though choreographed. They didn't fire wildly. They didn't chase. Every motion was deliberate, predictive. Their gravitational fields tugged at Valdari vessels with surgical precision, shutting down weapons, severing communications, disabling engines, without ever breaching hull integrity. The Valdari fleet wasn't being destroyed. It was being disarmed. Commander Yuki's realization. Yuki stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "They're not killing us," she whispered. "They could, but they are." Voss turned sharply. "Then they're fools." "No, Admiral," she said, eyes wide. "They're strategists. They're doing this to prove a point, to show the galaxy that they can win without becoming monsters like us." Voss's glare softened. He wanted to refute her, but her words echoed too deeply. He had spent centuries enforcing peace through fear, through destruction. But here, in this moment, a so-called primitive race had shown more discipline, more control than the Empire ever had. He lowered his voice. "What are they?" Dr. Hana's observation. In the Geneva bunker, Dr. Hana C. observed neural telemetry patterns projected from the Valdari fleet. Her models showed psychological strain levels nearing collapse across most enemy crews. "They're breaking," she said, "but not from pain, from comprehension. They're realizing the truth." President Dong crossed his arms. "Which is?" "That humans didn't just evolve to survive," Hana replied. "We evolved to understand survival, to make meaning from chaos, to build order from fear." She turned toward him. "They think strength is domination. We know strength is cooperation." Dong nodded slowly. "Then it's time they see what cooperation looks like." Phase 3, the demonstration. Back on the human fleet, Jiwon's voice echoed through every channel. "Initiate Phase 3, synchronize planetary lattice, begin full-spectrum projection." Every ship in orbit responded at once. Beams of light lanced outward, not as weapons, but as lines of data. The beams connected across the system, weaving a vast holographic structure in the sky above Earth. A glowing web of lines, forming patterns too complex for Valdari eyes to process. On the Valdari flagship, the hologram filled every viewport, a radiant network that stretched beyond imagination. Yuki gasped, "It's not an attack, it's information." Jiwon's voice resonated across the fleet. You wanted to know what we are, so here it is. The structure stabilized, and suddenly every Valdari ship began to receive streams of human data. Languages, art, history, equations, music. The holographic network projected not weapons, but knowledge. The flood of meaning. Admiral Voss stumbled back as his ship's AI translated fragments of human transmissions. These are images, Jinwu said in awe. Memories, wars, peace treaties, paintings, poems, the rise and fall of their civilizations. It's beautiful. The bridge filled with sound, music unlike anything Valdari had ever heard. Melodies of triumph and sorrow, voices singing in hundreds of languages, all woven together into a single composition. Voss closed his eyes. Why show us this? And then Jiwen's voice answered, calm and direct. Because fear is born from ignorance. You call us primitives, but you never tried to understand us. Every empire falls not when it is defeated, but when it refuses to learn. The collapse of arrogance. Across the Valdari fleet, silence reigned. Crew members stopped manning weapons. Some removed their helmets. Others simply stared at the screens, watching human art and science unfold before them. For the first time in their long, violent history, the Valdari were speechless. Voss sank slowly into his chair. His claws shook. We were wrong, he whispered. All this time we thought we were teachers. Yuki turned toward him. Perhaps, Admiral, it's time we became students. The choice of empires. In Geneva, Jiwen watched the readings stabilize. The Valdari fleet had gone completely still. No weapons charged, no engines primed. President Dong approached her. Do you think he'll listen? Jiwen's eyes softened. He already is. She opened a secure channel. Admiral Voss, she said, Earth extends its hand in peace. You came to conquer, but we offer collaboration. You can return to your people and tell them that humanity has no interest in ruling, only in rebuilding what your empire has broken. The line crackled. Then at last Voss's weary voice answered. And if my High Council refuses? Jiwen's tone was gentle but firm. Then they'll face not our wrath, but their own reflection. You've seen what we can do without firing a single lethal shot. Imagine what happens when we stop holding back. A moment of humanity. On the bridge of the Death of Worlds, Commander Yuki turned to her admiral. Sir, what are your orders? Voss was quiet for a long time. Then he whispered almost to himself, For 3,000 years I've believed power defined civilization. But these humans, they build it from unity, not fear. He straightened, his voice steady once more, but changed. Send a message to the fleet. Cease all hostilities. Prepare for retreat. Yuki nodded, tears glinting in her crimson eyes. Understood, Admiral. As the Valdari fleet powered down their weapons, the human ships slowly withdrew formation, their lights dimming to calm blues and whites. The holographic web above Earth faded, but the impression it left burned in every heart that saw it. For the first time in living memory, an empire had stopped fighting. And somewhere deep within the void, far beyond the reach of both fleets, other worlds, enslaved, forgotten, silent, began to stir as messages spread faster than light. The empire has met Earth, and Earth did not kneel. The galaxy was about to change forever. Silence, the kind of silence that comes only after the storm. The once mighty Valdari fleet drifted above Earth like a wounded beast, 500 warships reduced to 100 functional hulls, their black armor scarred and flickering with dying light. The void that had echoed with their thunder was now still. Admiral Voss stood at the bridge viewport, staring at the planet that had humbled the Empire. Blue oceans, green continents, clouds swirling like soft brushstrokes. A world that should have been prey, yet had shown the galaxy what true power looked like. Commander Yuki stood beside him, her voice quiet. The fleet reports full ceasefire, Admiral. No further aggression from Earth forces. They're holding position, waiting. Voss didn't move. Waiting for what? Yuki's eyes lingered on the shimmering lights below. For what comes next? In Geneva, Command. The bunker felt almost too quiet now. Screens glowed softly, data streams flowing in measured rhythm. The tension that had gripped humanity for 50 years had finally released. Dr. Jiwen Li leaned against a railing, her expression calm but unreadable. Around her, technicians exchanged weary smiles. Some cried, others just stared in disbelief. President Dong Haiyan entered the control hall, the weight of history etched into his face. Status. The Valdari fleet is in full retreat posture, Jiwin replied. No weapons active, no sign of resistance. He nodded slowly, and the broadcasts. Still transmitting, said one of the communications officers. Across all known frequencies, we estimate half the galaxy has received the signal by now. Jiwin's lips curved faintly. Then the truth is free. The galactic ripple. Across 1,000 star systems, the news spread like wildfire. On worlds that had long lived in chains, people gathered around flickering holograms, watching images of the impossible, Earth standing unbroken before the Valdari Armada. The Empire's most feared admiral forced to yield not to destruction, but to reason. In the slums of conquered worlds, the message repeated endlessly. The Empire met Earth, and Earth did not kneel. On mining moons, laborers whispered in the dark. On frontier outposts, resistance leaders wept. On forgotten colonies, the old songs of freedom were sung again. And somewhere far beyond the stars, hidden in the shadow of broken empires, others began to rise. Aboard the diplomatic station, Dr. Unipark sat across from Admiral Voss inside the same chamber where their first meeting had begun. Only this time there was no tension, no posturing, just quiet understanding. A teapot steamed gently between them. Voss studied the delicate cup she handed him. In your culture, he said slowly, tea is offered before a conversation begins, but this feels like an ending. Uni smiled. Endings and beginnings are the same thing, Admiral. It depends which direction you're facing. He sipped cautiously. The warmth surprised him. Bitterness and sweetness. Balance, Uni said. A concept you'll need if your empire is to survive what comes next. The offer. President Dong joined them moments later, carrying a tablet of documents. His tone was steady, his eyes tired but resolute. Admiral Voss, humanity has no wish to destroy your people. We've seen enough destruction for 10 lifetimes. What we want is peace, not submission, but cooperation. Voss's voice was low, conflicted. You would make allies of those who came to enslave you. Yes, Dong said simply, because that's what makes us human. Voss looked between them, the diplomat and the president, calm and unarmed, offering not revenge but partnership. For the first time in centuries, someone had spoken to him not as an enemy or subordinate, but as an equal. And what of the High Council? He asked. They will never accept this. They will send another fleet. Uni folded her hands. Then we'll be ready, but next time we won't stand alone. The Human Alliance. On the holographic table, a new projection appeared, the Lattice Treaty. An agreement drafted in secret years before, ready to be offered the moment peace became possible. The treaty proposed a galactic coalition. Humans, freed worlds, and any species willing to renounce conquest and embrace shared defense, open science, and mutual survival. Voss read the text silently. You mean to replace the Empire with unity? Dong nodded. Not replace, transform. The galaxy has lived under tyranny for too long. We're offering something new, something built on trust. The Admiral's red eyes flickered, the last embers of pride fading. You believe trust can tame the stars. Jiwin's voice echoed softly over the station comms. No, but it can guide them. The return. Later, aboard the Death of Worlds, Voss stood before his remaining crew. The bridge was silent. The officers looked broken, uncertain, afraid, but beneath that fear something else flickered, curiosity. He spoke slowly, deliberately. For 3,000 years we ruled by fear. We conquered worlds and called it peace. But today, a species we dismissed as primitive showed us what true strength looks like. He paused, glancing at Yuki. And it was not in their weapons, it was in their restraint. Murmurs rippled through the crew. We will return to Valdari Prime, Voss continued. We will tell the High Council what we've seen, and if they do not listen, then we will decide for ourselves what kind of future we wish to serve. Yuki saluted quietly, her voice trembling. Understood, Admiral. The conversation that changed history. When the Valdari fleet jumped to hyperspace, it left behind something far greater than wreckage. It left behind a new idea. In the days that followed, messages poured into Earth's diplomatic channels. Civilizations that had once hidden in fear now reached out in hope. The lattice treaty grew, spreading from one system to a dozen, then 100. Dr. Hana watched it unfold from the command center. "They're calling it the Day of the Turning," she said. Jiwon smiled faintly, a fitting name. President Dong looked at the growing network of lights across the galactic map. "How long until they realize what we've done?" Hana tilted her head. "That we haven't just ended an empire." Dong nodded. "That we've started something far more dangerous." Voss's return. Far away on Valdari Prime, Admiral Voss stood before the High Council, a circle of towering figures draped in silver armor, their faces hidden behind masks of authority. "You failed," hissed the speaker. "You allowed a single world to defy the Empire." Voss's voice was calm. "No, I witnessed the future." The chamber erupted in outrage, but he continued, unflinching. "We rule through fear, they lead through trust. Tell me, my lords, which do you think will last longer?" The speaker slammed his staff. "You speak treason." "Then call it treason," Voss said. "History will call it wisdom." He turned and walked away, leaving behind 3 millennia of unquestioned power. And for the first time in Valdari history, others followed him. The dawn of a new age. Months later, a new council convened above Earth, not of conquerors, but of equals. Humans and aliens stood side by side, signing the Lattice Treaty beneath a canopy of stars. No flags of empire, no anthems of dominance, only quiet resolve. Dr. Jiwon Lee spoke before the gathered delegates. For centuries, the galaxy believed survival meant submission, but survival is not obedience, it's adaptation. We have all been prey once, but now we evolve together. Applause echoed softly through the hall. The legacy of Earth. As night fell over the planet, humanity looked up at the stars, no longer symbols of fear, but of connection. The sky was alive with color, the last remnants of the battle still painting faint auroras across the horizon. Children in the streets pointed upward. News channels called it the lights of freedom. In Geneva, Jiwon stood on the balcony overlooking the city, tea in hand. Hana joined her. "You think they'll keep their promise?" Hana asked. Jiwon smiled faintly. "Empires break promises, people don't." She looked up at the sky. "We've shown them what humanity is capable of, now we have to prove it." Epilogue: the message. Weeks later, a faint transmission reached every world that had once bowed to the Empire. It carried no threat, no command, only a voice. Calm, human, and resolute. To every species who has known fear. You are not alone anymore. The age of conquest is over. The age of understanding has begun. The message ended with a simple phrase, one that would echo for generations. We are humanity, and we fight for everyone. High above Earth, the stars shimmered with unseen movement, not weapons now, but construction. Dozens of ships, human and alien alike, worked side by side, building something vast, the first galactic conquered station. Where once the Empire's fleets had loomed in darkness, now a new light rose, steady, patient, unafraid. Admiral Voss's voice, recorded before his departure, played one last time through the station's comms. For 3,000 years, we ruled through terror, but the day we met Earth, we learned the truth. The future does not belong to those who conquer. It belongs to those who understand. The camera pulled back through the stars. Earth glowed beneath, serene, defiant, eternal. And across the galaxy, once enslaved worlds whispered the same name, not with fear but with hope. Humans,